Welcome to the Blue Room. It is a new sort of thing for us here. You can see us all for a starter, as you can probably see. If you've not watched it on YouTube before, you might not know who these people are. It's Les Roberts and Mark Mosey. Mark's drinking a can of Blue Moon. Les is drinking what's that, Les? Sierra Nevada.
Hard pale ale.
My word.
Sort of chalice type glass.
We are high class lads tonight. I'm not entirely sure what format this is going to go out in. We'll put it on YouTube. We'll trim the audio and put it out on our usual platforms as well. It's quite weird to see you both looking directly at me. It's a bit unsettling, to be honest. I usually can look away. When we're in the studio, I can look away from you both and don't have to, look directly in the eye or go on the phone. But now I have to be fully focused on you both. I suppose the first thing to say is how are you both doing with the coronavirus self-isolation? I know you're in work, Mark. We'll come to you shortly. But Les, what have you been up to over the last few days?
Well, basically, I do a lot of working from home anyway, so this is sort of nothing new for me. Yeah, working from home. Skype, keep the emails on, that sort of thing. So, but basically, everyone down in the London office now has got to work from home as well. So they're having these like hourly check-ins to see how everyone's getting on, and is everything okay, everything working right. I'm like, this is just like really interrupting my usual day. Wanting to speak to me, it's doing me head in, but yeah, it's fine. No one's died yet, so we're all good.
Mark, you work in a pharmacy, so you're very much on the front line of all this.
Yeah.
How have you coped with it so far? I mean, I suppose it's a serious topic here, and people will probably may not be fully attuned to this. People who listen to us regularly will know that my wife's a doctor. People who listen to us regularly know that you're a pharmacist, and you guys are very much on the front line. While we're here to talk about footy, and we will come on to talk about footy a little bit later on, there is serious things to talk about here. I mean, how are you finding it? How are the customers that you usually get finding it?
Being on the front line was always one of those phrases that when it kicked off, it sounds, and it surely can't be that bad. I can now confirm that it's that bad. Pharmacies do feel like trenches, and you give your colleagues that kind of knowing look when you arrive at work in the morning, like, who's going to take a bullet for me today? Because it really feels like a battle. And obviously things are intensifying even obviously today as we record. We hear news about sort of schools closing and all that sort of thing. But I think for anyone, as you say, a plethora of roles across the healthcare platform, but for anyone who works in healthcare at the moment, it's so difficult trying to explain to people how severe and how bad it is. The level of, I think the key thing is just panic. And I mean, we see that on all stages, be it supermarkets or pharmacies. Times of uncertainty will generate absolute hysteria, but you feel like you've earned your money. You put it that way. But yes, it's really tough, but I just hope that things obviously improve. But I think the thing for all of us is whatever social situation you're in or whatever work situation, it's just totally uncharted territory. No one knows what they're doing. And so many, I mean, for myself, it's sort of like laws that govern what you do, and for other people, it's logistics or how they get certain, something like this, like how you get your media out. It's just so unpredictable about what we're doing. But
mine and Mark's answer, the difference in a job, like a real job, like a pharmacist, mine in marketing. Mark feels like he's done a full day's work every day because he's getting minded and like panicked people coming at him all day. And I'm like, man, there's people getting in the way of me going to the gym at dinner time and things like that. I'm just inconvenienced by people getting in touch with me.
Yeah, well, I suppose what you say there about it being unprecedented is absolutely right. But I suppose it's one of them as well where, I don't know about you, Les, but when we did the shows last week and we were talking about this sort of thing, it was very much a case of, we were aware of it and we were aware it was serious what was going on, but because it wasn't really here yet and there was still a match going on, in the city, in the Champions League, I don't really think the gravity of it had totally hit yet. And, we still being semi-serious about it all. And a week on, I mean, how long ago does that match between Liverpool and Atletico Madrid feel now? It was only a week ago today. And it feels like so much has changed, so much has gone on. And I suppose for me that, and for a lot of people who know that sense of it being unprecedented has gone from it being, this will probably all be okay, to actually it's a little bit serious now. And it's understandably making a lot more people anxious.
Yeah, I think to pull it round to a football thing as well, it's sort of like the UEFA and that have said, yeah, we're going to get all the domestic leagues finished by June 30th, and it's like, it's really going to go on longer than, like, we're not going to be all back to normal by April the 3rd. We're not going to just start, like, going about our normal lives. April the 3rd, April the 4th, we'll play football, things like that. Like, all our kids' footy and kids' training's been suspended. Oh, no, that's not good.
No.
Matt's dropped out. It's the first technical hitch. I'll try and add them. We'll just talk amongst ourselves while we do that.
Maybe this isn't great for the Blue Room. This whole thing. I mean, we're having a bevy doing the show, and it's all well and good. But when the host bails out, I think we need to reflect on how we're doing things here. This is what I'm talking about poor logistics.
It is. Yeah, we should have just, like, I don't know, got in the car, met down the front at Lisa or something like that. Might have looked a bit sketchy, but we would have all been in one place at the same time.
Mark Sefton Park, that wouldn't have been anything untoward for him. I think he's pretty used to a few random cars pulling up outside his house and flashing the lights through his window. So I think he'd been all right with it. But here we are taking Boris Johnson's advice, which I thought we'd never say on the Blue Room, but there you go.
I know, it's quite the culture shock, isn't it? Oh, is he there? Have we got him?
Is he needed? This is a pioneering moment for the Blue Room here, in that our host Matt Jones is actually not required for the show.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
bad timing on that comment.
I don't know what happened there. I didn't even hear that then. What did you say?
No, I just said how the show doesn't really function when you're not here. You're such a valued member of this, in particular this trio, but the show on a wider scale as well. So it's good to have
recorded.
Oh, we floundered the whole thing there. We're just making small talk among ourselves. Yeah, I think to the point you were saying was, yeah, it really is unprecedented, and it does feel like a sense of foreboding now that, like, yeah, we could actually be locked in our houses for quite some time here. Like, I mean, the things that are happening in France and Spain, you got to look at that now and think, yeah, that's what we're getting. That's what it's going to come to over here. You know, and you look at the speed with which they've said, start of the week, oh, well, you know, just wash your hands, won't close the schools, to now where they're saying, actually, yeah, we're going to close the schools. That's a massive, massive shift in policy and attitude towards it. And it's like, yeah, it's really getting serious now.
What song do you sing when you wash your hands?
He's Brazilian.
It's got to be Erasure for me after that's become an anthem recently amongst our group of friends. I tried to discover, yeah.
20 seconds, but it's definitely worth it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Sorry to be first of all. Sorry about the interruption for anyone who's watching or listening to that there. But you know, sort of moving this on to footy, because you know, I think while there is a serious thing going on here, and we all appreciate that these are very serious times. People, I imagine, come to listen to us talk about football, get our opinions on Everton and that sort of thing. So we will sort of branch this out. We will try and look at this in our usual tone and with our usual sort of style. Looking back at the last few days, Mark, you know, we had a text in our Blue Room group message today from Kate Riley James saying she's been missing shouting at the screen at Sky pundits and BT pundits and lads in blue doing terrible things on a football pitch. How are you feeling about it at the moment? Have you missed your sporting intake over the weekend? Was it very much a case of doing different things, going for a walk, seeing different people, you know, spending time, or is it? Did it hit you a little bit maybe on Sunday when you used to be watching a game or something like that?
Well, I think the key phrase you mentioned there is sport and intake. And I think when you do omit football or you remove Everton from your life, usually because of an international break or something like that, you have at least got something to buy into, even if it's a different sport or something that you might only be relatively interested in. It's at least something that you can invest yourself and invest your time in. At the moment, it's just a total void, to the point where, because sport is off the agenda for me, I'm not actually missing it because it's not seen as an acceptable or an approachable element of life. It's as though that everything has just been totally wiped. And I know that we get occasional conversation when people revert back to sport and think about, you know, where do we go from here with Premier League season, Euros, other sports, whatever it may be. But I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but I'm finding it hard to remember what it's like to be so involved in football, and be that Everton or football or sport in general. I know you talk about last week and how long ago that seems, but watching this Everton team or going to Goodison Park feels like an eternity ago. And I don't know if that's just because it feels like we're kind of living in a bit of a dream world at the moment, but even when I saw someone like Richarlison on Twitter this week, obviously trying to be public and quite uplifting with his media, it's hard to relate yourself to him or his life or his job or anything at the moment, because everything's so far removed at the moment. Yeah. I'm not related to him before you say that.
What did we make of his R9 haircut, by the way?
It's a shocker.
I was surprised at like how raggedy his actual fringe was.
Yeah.
I mean, he got that line quite neat, but
he's obviously gone for the Ronaldo. But Ronaldo's tuft was relatively small. It does look as though the barber self-isolated halfway through the haircut.
Definitely.
It looks like I think he's probably done it himself.
I think so.
Yeah, maybe the way it looked like he might have done it himself. But
washing his hands at the end of it, he's done.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I suppose that's going to be another interesting thing, isn't it, Les, in regards to how, obviously we are, sports media, and we put a lot of stuff out on these sorts of things and on Twitter and on the website and that sort of stuff. It's going to be interesting to see how the industry as a whole deals with this, because at the moment, you turn on Sky Sports and it's very much a case of, them reporting on things being cancelled and when things might potentially happen again, and looking back at what's happened. But give it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and while I appreciate what Mark's saying there about it does feel like we're in a dream world at the moment, and sport is very much secondary to all this, and probably not even secondary. It's a long way down the list. There is probably going to come a point where they're a bit like, well, what do we talk about here now? There's not really much we can react to. There's not really much we can preview. It's going to be a bit tough for everyone, I think, in that regard, isn't it?
Yeah, I've seen some things on Twitter where people are reporting what's happening on TalkSport. And there's been things like Stuart Pearce's name and his best Premier League 11 and he's named 12. Or something. He's named his best 11 punk songs and he's named 12. Things like that. It's like they seem to be really struggling for content because it's so football heavy. And I think really it should hit us hardest because like Everton is all we talk about. That's our USP. That's all we are. Basically, so if we've not got anything to talk about Everton related, it's kind of like, well, what do we do? But I feel like we've got enough about us to get through it. So I think we've got enough interest and we can talk round subjects enough to get through this. But yeah, I think once this 3 week period passes and we get to the start of April and we realise, actually, no, we're not going to be kicking a football for another 4 weeks maybe, then it'll be like, okay, yeah, it gets a bit real for the sporting world then, because you get the feeling they still feel very isolated, very sort of away from it all, like it's not affecting them. As I said before, what you wait for saying, yeah, we're going to finish all domestic leagues by the 30th of June. It's like, well, you're probably not, it's going to be a massive effort to do that. And the same, you can play behind closed doors. It's like, well, that you're not factoring that the players might be infected then. It's like, God, that sounded like a zombie movie then, didn't it? The players were infected. It's gone all 28 days later.
You sound like slime soccer or stick cricket or something that people can remotely relate to.
Soccer. Oh, remember that. That was fantastic.
Sensible soccer tournaments. Finish it. Just play the remaining games of the season on sensible soccer and like just play out the league that way.
Get Robbie Maggio's magical kicks back up again.
Yeah, get this is football where you could dive. That was a great game.
You could dive. Yeah, wow. You need to bring that back. But I suppose, when we mentioned this sporadically on the show, we don't really plug it too much. Probably shouldn't as much as we should. But I think one of the things that is important at this time is that people need to feel connected. And, while we play it down and, talk about quite lightheartedly, this is a time where people are going to be feeling, isolated. They are going to be isolating themselves, going to feel isolated from football. And I think it's going to be hard for people to maintain their interest and keep up those passions while they are effectively locked away in the houses or flats. So I think that's where anyone watching this, who's watching it for the first time, anyone who's watched this for lots of years, interact with us on Twitter, interact in these comments, let us know what you want us to talk about, whether it's Everton related or you want to hear Rob Vieira talk about music or whatever else he goes on about, all his pop culture references, that sort of stuff. We've got loads of time to do it. We've got stuff in the pipeline, but yeah, it is more important than ever. And I suppose as well, Mark, on that point, that's going to be another difficult thing for a lot of people, I imagine, isn't it? Because while I think it was Jorge Valdano who wrote recently that of all the things that don't matter, football's the most important thing. And we all use it, and a lot of people use it as an escape from reality, and escape from the troubles. And when you see all the issues that are going to materialise over the next few weeks, and the potential strain on people's mental health, not having that release is going to be really tough for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think you touched on the mental health thing there. There's so many NHS resources that we have to kind of relate to during the working day, and all sorts of people asking, do I have to self-isolate, and all of these physical conditions and physical issues that people have. But I think if you look at a lot of what the NHS have published and posted out to people, it does very much touch upon the kind of the mental side of isolation. I mean, isolation is itself a word that we use in a very negative tone to describe people who haven't got all of those things that you said, the public connections and the people to bounce ideas and just basic conversation off. And I think it's a credit to the NHS that they are including that in the published documents, but also a credit to people who have made that the reality and made that the case over the last few years, you'd say, in terms of mental health really getting the platform that so many people have said that it's warranted for a much longer time. And I think it is something now that is critical to so many people. And of course, vulnerable adults and the elderly are probably the people that you instinctively think of as being kind of cut off from the real world. Obviously, that has its physical implications of basic things like being able to go out and get shopping, for example. Yeah. But it's a social issue as well of people not being able to interact with human beings. I mean, we are essentially, as mankind, meant to interact with each other for so many different reasons, and the fact that we are not able to do that at the moment is going to be so damaging to so many people. And as much as we talk about timescales, be it 1 week, 2 weeks, 12 weeks in some cases of people having to kind of segregate themselves away, you do get the feeling that it's going to be very long term in terms of the implications of people getting over physical symptoms, but actually getting over the mental issues that surround being cut off from the world for so long.
The thing, if you look at like what we're doing now as well, it's like this is seen as like an alternative to actually seeing people in the flesh, but it's nothing like it, is it?
No.
I mean, if we're in the studio doing this now, there's a totally different sort of dynamic going on. It's a lot different. So although it's good to be able to do this, it's not, if you're really feeling the strain, this will help, but it's just not the same. It's just not as tangible as it's going to be a really weird few months, this.
Yeah, it's going to be challenging for a lot of people. Just very quickly on Everton, not loads to say. My connection's terrible, lads. Do forgive me. I can barely register up with what you guys are saying. But from an Everton point of view, obviously the club last week sent staff and players home after one of the players showed symptoms. They released a couple of statements in the day. The second one was obviously a corrective one after a mistake was made in the first one. But the club seem to be, like everyone, like I suppose all organisations are going to have to do are reacting to this. They put out a video last night of the 84 derby with Graham Sharp scored. Did any of you watch that along?
I've not seen it. I saw the lineups coming out, and I thought it was when I can't remember. I think it was Dave Downey who commented and said he's Sigurdsson on the wing, and you just thought you can take the football and the weekly fixtures away, but you can never take that cynical Evertonian away from his own body. It's fantastic.
Thing as well is, we look at that 85 team as the absolute perfect Everton team. That's what it is, isn't it? And I saw a few people saying, there'd still be people moaning about that team, and there actually would have been, because Alan Harper was on the wing.
Yeah.
I assume he was injured, but it would have been like, oh, freaking hell, Harper on the wing.
Was the right saying that Andy Gray was on the bench as well? And a lot of people mentioned that.
Sub, wasn't there?
Yeah.
You can't think like how different the game was then. It's like it almost is a totally different game. The way you had to set your team up, the size of the squad you had, one substitute. So basically, if your defender got crocked, you're like, I've only got a striker.
Yeah. Who was the emergency defender in that team then, Les? Who would go into this defence and play centre back if one of them got injured?
Probably Alan Harper, because he could play anywhere.
Yeah.
I think what we would, if the centre back would have got injured, I imagine Pat van der Al probably would have gone to a centre back, and then Alan Harper would have gone to left back. I imagine. But basically, that was the good thing about Alan Harper. He literally could play, and I think he did play everywhere apart from in goal.
The 80s in Holgate.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I was going to say, we haven't really got a player like that now, but that's probably not right, to be fair, yeah. I mean, subs would be so much. Players, you think about the way the game's gone, how much money is in it now. You think if there was just 12 players in a squad, there'd be players would probably be worth even more, wouldn't they? In the modern game.
Yeah, definitely.
You probably have lads who are like specialist positions in that sort of area. And I mean, I don't know if that's what. Did most teams have a striker on the bench then, Les, as the one sub, or people sort of have players who could do a bit of everything?
Do you know, I can't remember, but I don't know, I can't remember. I'm trying to think of that squad, sort of who would have been the bench warmers. So there was Kevin Richardson and Alan Harper, the only two I can think of, and they were both basically left wingers. Kevin Sheedy was a sick note. That's what it must have been.
But I would probably say that in terms of special position, you probably get more now because there's an allowance for having more people in your squad. But say for so many teams who play sort of that 2 holding and then 3 more advanced midfielders. If you think about in particular those 2 wide players in terms of out and out wingers, you probably never got quite as much of that in back in the day because you needed them to be a utilitarian left or right midfielder. There was so much emphasis on them being very much more of a solid unit and definitely being capable of playing 30 to 40 games a season. And I think now you probably do get players in sort of an Alex Iwobi ilk, for example, who have not necessarily ever solidified one position. But if you do put them into that specialist wide or drop them in the hole and behind the front 2, they are able to do that, but possibly only for 20 games a season. So it's definitely diversified a lot of positions and obviously formations in the last sort of 30 years. Yeah. And honestly, I don't think many players could really hack that now.
No, I think the midfield in particular has changed because if you look at like that midfield of Reid and Bracewell, between them they did everything. They did every job any midfielder needs to do. So there was no holding midfielder, there was no attacking midfielder, there was no cam, no CDM. It was just you got 2 lads in the middle there and they just do the lot, and they did it very well.
Yeah, remember when Everton had the mid?
So I don't know. Yeah. Were we self-isolating then, or?
Well, Jean-Philippe Gavin might actually play a game by the time that lads are playing footy again.
It'll still be 3 weeks away.
Yeah, but do you know what? I watched a bit of that game last night. I didn't see the moments before the goal. I was watching the first half of it and seeing parts of that game. I don't know if you watched any of it, Mark, or not.
I've not seen it, no, but I definitely, for my fix, need to go back and try and invest in something Everton related, but also something quite positive.
How weird the pass back rule?
Oh, yeah. It's bizarre. It's so bizarre.
Yeah. I mean, just seeing players kick it back to the goal, he picks it up. Weird.
It's going to be one of those things that it's like the players being allowed in the box for goal kicks now. Like in 20 years, we'll look back at that and go, bloody hell, how weird was that? But that was allowed to happen. Well, just sort of on that team, Les, before we sort of move this on a little bit, I've watched a fair few games with them playing. Obviously, the main ones, Bayern Munich and the final and some of the FA Cup finals and stuff like that. But I was just struck by the intensity which they played with. And I know the lads in that side sort of had, we had a lot of technically good players as well. You mentioned someone like Sheedy there, Bracewell, and, Stephen and Stevens on the right-hand side. But I was just watching it thinking, bloody hell, those lads were so intense in what they went about. And maybe just because the previous game was that 4-0 loss at Chelsea for the previous side. But you compare those lads in midfield and, the way in which the fullbacks got up and down, the way the wingers got up and down, in the same sort of system to what we played in that Chelsea game. It's apples and oranges.
It is, yeah. It's actually a good comparison to make that, isn't it? Because there's not many times you've been able to compare 4-4-2 with 4-4-2.
Yeah.
You look at it, that like from that 80s team, it shows you the intensity you need from every single one of your players playing in that formation. They all need to cover every bit of grass, not just in their area, but in everyone else's area. I think if you watch, have you both seen the Howard's Way film?
Yeah.
You can see that was a unit of players, and they all fought for each other. They were all very good footballers, but they all fought for each other. And there was that mad team spirit that they had, and I think I don't know if that's going from the modern game. It's so easy to say, isn't it? basically, it's not like that anymore. It was
Game's
like
gone. Yeah.
back
The game
then.
is literally gone at the moment. Yeah.
This is basically so on mailbag last week. Mike basically took the mickey out of me because I said something about the 70s. It's like, oh, here we go, Grandad. But it's an easy trap to fall into because you don't see that sort of team spirit now, do you? You see the lads getting on that, but the fight isn't there. I think that was the hallmark of that team, that you were all technically good players. You made a great team, but you battled for each other as well. So I think that was it. Andy Gray or Peter Reid said, we'll play it off the park, but if you want to fight, we'll have a fight. And that's what you
back to squad size again, though, doesn't it? In terms of as much as you think, oh, well, you know, I can't let the man next to me down. There's a necessity there for you to play and for you to do everything you can for the man next to you, because ultimately there's no one in behind you to come in and do that role. And as much as modern footballers would never admit now that, you know, if I don't do it, I know someone else will, because I'm sure that's not their mindset. But the nature of squads is that there is kind of a relaxed nature to how they go about their work, because there are other people who they can rely on. If you look at, I mean, if you think of it in a very similar situation of a more modern era, you look at David Moyes' Everton, and there was very much that feel in his squad that we had in the 80s, albeit with not quite as much success, whereby we were all in it together. There was about 14 or 15 core lads, and we were going to be greater than the sum of our parts. And that is probably the first time since that era that we've been able to produce something like that. And I don't think it's any, obviously, some recent Premier League winners have had fantastic squads and an abundance of talent. But if you look at some of the other winners, sort of like Leicester City under Claudio Ranieri, and quite a lot of the post Abramovich Chelsea teams have been very much reliant on a core and possibly picking 2 or 3 others to come in and play that utilitarian role. But I think it's underestimated how much success you can harvest from a smaller unit of lads who are so intense and so in tune with each other.
And I suppose, in one sense, you know, people might be watching this saying, you know, you hold them the current side to high standards here, lads. You know, looking back at our greatest ever, probably our greatest ever side, and one of their best ever wins at Anfield. But it'd be interesting, Les, just thinking there. If you sort of looking at it now and how potentially Carlo Ancelotti can turn this around, if you look back to that team in the 80s, and, you know, we spoke about the intensity with which they all played there, were the lads that either before they came to Everton or before Howard came to Everton, that you'd look at and maybe talk, you know, referencing some of the, you know, the current players in our squad and say, he doesn't fancy putting a shift in. And whereas we talk about players now like Sigurdsson and Davis and, you know, people Gomez at the weekend, people like Bernard, they sort of say, well, they're all technically good, but, you know, maybe not got the energy and that drive and that hunger. Were the lads in that side as well, going back to the 80s, that you would have looked at and gone, well, they're a bit of a lost cause, who aren't quite going to make it, who Howard Kendall turned into players who could fit the system in a way in which maybe Ancelotti can do for this team?
I think the big thing about the Ancelotti team is there was no superstars when they were bought. So I think we got Trevor Steven from Burnley. Kevin Ratcliffe came through the academy. I think Derek Mountfield we got from Tranmere. Peter Reid was a crock from Bolton. Andy Gray was a crock from Aston Villa. 2 journeymen who were like, the knees were battered. So it was very much he took a load of promising players and made them into a better team. So yeah, from that angle, that's kind of how that team was built.
Did he only sign players who fitted that sort of blueprint then, do you think? Was that very much it? It wasn't lads who we could potentially say a bit lazy and a bit, you know, a bit flashy he could potentially mould. It was very much players who fitted that blueprint and we just sort of built upon.
Yeah, it strikes me that the players were bought for that system, because I think about 1981, he went out, I think when he first came to the club, he went out and bought 7 players. And I think the only one he made it was Southall.
Yeah.
So it was like the famous Magnificent 7. I think Mickey Thomas was in there, and there was 7 players, and they all just like completely flopped at the club, apart from Southall, who only just got in, really through sort of a quirk of fate, because he was out on loan at Port Vale, and it was a toss of a coin, I think, between him and Jim Arnold in the Coventry game, who got the nod, and we drew 0-0 in that one. So it was very much right time, right place for a lot of the players, but I think the players were bought with a certain mentality in mind. because they weren't technically brilliant players at the time. Adrian Heath was from Stoke as well, so a lot of the players were brought in, obviously, I think, to fit Kendall's vision. And then sort of the icing on the cake, or the catalyst for the whole team, was Andy Gray and Peter Reid, because they were the two old heads who came in. So I think if you look at players, they were all bought, and to go back to Mark's point about Moyes, he would study players' backgrounds, not just their ability, and see how they'd fit into the squad. And I think that's definitely something that's been lacking with this squad. And I think that's what Ancelotti needs to do, because as Mark said, if there is some merit still in having a committed group of players that's smaller, cut down on your squad size, but get more commitment out of them. And funnily enough, I think the only luxury player I'd say we had in that team was Kevin Sheedy. To be fair, I think he's a player now who get a bit of stick because he wouldn't do all the running, but he was Kevin Sheedy. So
I remember a lot of people comparing Billy Letterman to him when he first signed. Sheedy. Sorry, Mark.
You would have had a far greater Everton presence for an eternity if we just played him in that number 10 role behind the striker, but that's an entirely different argument.
Just giving it to it outside the box.
I'm so jealous that Les has been happy in his life. I can't imagine ever having seen levels of success that
the thing is, though,
is to witness.
To put this in some sort of context, I think the first game he remembers Man United when we beat them 5-0 in '84. Yeah. But to put it in context, a couple of games after that, I was asking my dad who the fella in the black was. I was at that level of watching football where I didn't really get it. I'd be stuck there, like, just amusing myself during the game, looking around and singing and things like that. So it was great because it was just at that age where I was getting into football. But it's not like fellas who were there like when they were 15, 16, 18.
Mm-hmm. I think the thing you mentioned about the squad and the word you both mentioned is blueprint, and I think that is something that obviously during that time and Les, you talking about it, sounds like we definitely had. I think so much about being an Evertonian and everything that comes out of the club is focused around identity, and no one else outside this club knows what we're about, and there's an in-house feeling about how the football team should be built. And I do think that a little bit of that has really been lost over the last few years. That comes with managerial turnover. It comes with a change of style in terms of people that you bring in. Someone like Carlo Ancelotti, someone like Ronald Koeman, Roberto Martinez, they are not necessarily quintessential Everton or English football people. And I think it's very hard to persist and build around a core of players who probably need longevity in terms of working together to kind of harvest success, but never really ever get that. And I mean, we could all name countless Everton players, and in particular young Everton players, who have fallen victim to change and turnover of players around them, and in particular of managers. But I don't necessarily think that the whole idea of identity and the Everton blueprint persists now to the same degree that it probably did 30 years ago.
It's got to be the Ancelotti blueprint now, hasn't it? I think that's ultimately why we got him in. It's got to be what he wants to do and who he wants to bring in that regard. So yeah, interesting to see. We can still talk about footy. It's all okay in that regard. Plenty to go on. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that 80s team and reflect back on that. Just quickly, are there any other games you want the club to put out and share that we can sort of do a bit of a watch along to? I'm sure we'll get into that sort of stuff. Not necessarily obvious ones like trophy wins and semi-final like Bayern Munich, that sort of stuff. But any that stand out that you just love to see again?
Hot times of Everton turmoil and the nearly games and where we've missed out, because as much as the coronavirus has provided some negativity, it doesn't quite scrape the barrel if you saw like an Everton mishap will. I'm trying Wigan at home, bring that up.
Yeah. On that thing, I think the one for me would be getting leathered 5-1 at home by Norwich. Mike Walker's Norwich. I might add, Effing a Cuckoo got 4. Today.
Do you know what I'd love to see again? The speaking about this before, the 3-3 at home with United, where we scored twice.
Yeah.
Injury time. Because I think the good thing about that game is you can sort of sit there and watch the whole thing, knowing that obviously something's good's going to come. You're not going to turn it off after 75 minutes when we scored the equaliser. We don't get the winner. You're watching it all the way through with the context of what's happened at the end in mind. And Moyes running onto the pitch to try and throttle Martin Atkinson as well after he stopped Phil Jagielka from running through on goal, of course.
If I was to watch that game again, I'd still be pretty convinced that Jagielka was about to win it for us at the end.
But yeah, like I said, we are after interactions. Let us know on that. We'll sure we can send the clubs away and try and get some games put up. But yeah, do get in touch with us. Do speak to us. Do message myself, Mark, and Les over on Twitter. Let us know what you want to see more from the Blue Room in the next few days. I want to see Blue Room pets on the video as well. Have you got the cat nearby, Mark?
Yeah, I've just locked him out. Otherwise, he'd be well onto it because he'd let us look around.
I did the same at mine as well. I just checking to see if he shut the door. That's why he's not been in.
I want pets of the Blue Room over the next few weeks, so we'll get Dave Downey's dashings on, no doubt, at some point. And I think we'll sort that out. But what are you doing over the next few days then, while you're potentially locked down in isolation? I suppose we're not locked down yet. We could have done this in the boozer, but we're being sensible. But any grand plans? Any big Netflix series to watch?
I hate you too. Why can't I work from home? This is peaceful. Les, I'll let you feel all the fun elements of this question.
Weekend off though, haven't you? Of course.
I actually made the sensible decision before to not go to the gym.
Okay.
The gym by us is still open, but I made the sensible decision not to. So I went for a run down at the front at least, and I feel like I'm going to die now. I've got this terrible cough coming on, which I'm hoping is just the wind getting in my lungs on the front, because I nearly died running, but I don't know, probably more of that.
Honestly.
Top wall. Well, on that note, it might be Les Roberts' last ever appearance on the Blue Room. That cough, from his sick bed. Mark, what about you? Apart from stocking up on hand gels from the pharmacy and that sort of stuff, anything going on this weekend?
No, I live to serve now. So to the point where if I was to self-isolate, it would probably just be easier for me to just lock myself in the pharmacy and not actually come home. So I might isolate from home. But no,
I'm sure it'll be fine. Just let people know where you live. Bring all the stuff back to yours.
Every spare moment this weekend will be spent lying down in a dark room, hoping that no one mentions the word Calpol to me. Dear me. Yeah, but right, lads, appreciate your time. Obviously, I know you've both been very busy, Mark in particular. But sorry about the connection. I think mine's been a bit hit and miss throughout the show. We will work on that over the next few weeks. Hope you enjoy the video format as well. And like I said, connect with us. Let us know what you want from us over the next few weeks and months, and we'll be here for your Everton fix. This has been your Blue Room Weekly Show.